Good afternoon and welcome to Africa Tech Summit Connects, our digital series, which looks at connecting African technology and bringing insights from across the ecosystem. I'm delighted to say today we're going to look at Nigeria's tech opportunity in the crisis. Before we start, I know there's some people still going to join the call. We'll just go through some quick housekeeping. We will have a discussion with two of our panelists, and we will also encourage questions from our audience. Please use the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen, and we will try and get through as many of these questions as we can, and keep them coming. We'll also have a poll which you can share your answers on as well, and it'd be great to get an understanding of what your key challenges are right now within this environment. You can also use hashtag ATSConnects on Twitter and Facebook to continue the conversation after with our panelists, or if you have any specific asks, please tag us. We're happy to share any news and get some awareness for what you're doing out there. So if we go to today's discussion, we're looking at Nigeria's tech opportunity in a crisis. And I'm delighted today to welcome two very prominent people in Nigerian tech. Vivian Nwakah, who's founder of Medsaf, and Kola Aina, founder of Ventures Platform. Hi guys, welcome to the webinar. How are you doing today?
Hi, we're doing okay. Nigeria just extended the lockdown to 14 days, so we're gonna get through this. Very interesting times.
Yeah.
Hi everyone, Kola's here, doing really well. Good to join the call, and good to talk about the exciting times we live in.
Great. Well, I mean, most people will know both of you. For those that don't, Vivian, can you just give a brief background about yourself and Medsaf, and then Kola?
Born and raised in the U.S., moved here about 6 years ago, and found Nigeria, Africa to be extremely exciting as far as opportunities to just fix things. Noticed that the healthcare industry had no attention, no one was talking about it. There's quite a lot of deficiencies in the Nigerian context, but also worldwide, really, and we're seeing that today in breakdowns of supply chain, lack of access, etc. But from the Nigerian perspective, noticed that people were dying from fake and substandard medications. And that's where Medsaf was born, out of this idea that quality medication is a fundamental right, and that we can use technology to jump over a lot of the hurdles that have kept medication and pharmaceutical distribution backwards in countries like Nigeria. So we set up Medsaf in 2017. Medsaf is a one-stop shop for healthcare stakeholders to purchase, manage, and track medications through supply chains. We're looking to gather that data to help serve the industry better. So hospitals and pharmacies can have, better quality medications. Manufacturers get insights into movement of medications and the needs of the people. And the overall goal is that, you and I can walk into a pharmacy or hospital and trust the medications that we are given. So Medsaf is, has been thriving since about 2017, and here we are.
Well done. Kola.
Yeah, great. So my name is Kola Aina. I'm from Nigeria, and my background is in finance, personally, and a series of entrepreneurial activities since then. Most of my work has been in technology. I built an enterprise software services company after moving back to Nigeria about 10 years ago. And about 4 years ago, I decided to sort of roll up all my experiences and networks into helping early stage entrepreneurs raise capital, which was something I struggled with in the early days of trying to start my business, our business in Nigeria. It was just impossible to raise capital for something in technology locally. And so and that's how Ventures Platform was born. Our core thesis or core sort of ethos is to be a discovery fund for identifying high potential entrepreneurs that are building companies that solve problems across various verticals, as Vivian said, all around you in Nigeria and Africa, challenges that we view as opportunities. And so our role in the market is to identify folks pretty early and back them with capital, but as well as our networks, access to partnerships, navigating regulatory environments, and just really helping with the building blocks pretty early. We've supported about 40 companies that operate across the continent, a number of category leading companies in that portfolio, and yeah, happy to be here.
Great. I mean, if we look at the lockdown, it's across the world. Our lockdown in Europe have been extended as well, and Nigeria. If we look specifically at Nigeria and the impact of this, COVID on it, the oil budget at $57 a barrel is going to be dramatically affected. Currently standing at $30 today. Naira devaluation, rising inflation, blah blah. We know all the we know all the negatives, but I think today what's good is that we got two great people on the call who are also looking at the positives and the opportunities. And I think also compared to previous crises, which we've had, we've never been so lucky in terms of connectivity and having all these resources to fall back on. So if I can come to you first, Vivian, can you talk us through, how the crisis has affected you at Medsaf and the business today, and also obviously the great opportunity it's provided for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think on the plus side, we back in 2016, we went to hospitals and said, would you order your medications online? And it was like this alien concept, right? Whereas now I can really see a future in Nigeria, but just also worldwide where, medication distribution is tracked very carefully using technology. So that reality is so much closer. I think it's, we've just kind of accelerated to a place where it now makes sense for the average hospital or pharmacy across Nigeria. So that's been a plus in that we haven't had to change too much of our operations in any way. We're still working. So my team is right now in the office performing quality control and getting shipments out. So nothing has really stopped us per se. I think what's happened is we've now found ourselves in a situation where we're better suited to start helping larger entities like governments. We have some government work in the pipeline, NGOs, corporations, with making sure that not only that medications and consumables are getting where they need to be, but also, PPE. So that's been a huge opportunity, getting the masks out there to the public, getting gloves, hand sanitizer. So we've now seen a bigger or wider audience. The big opportunity for us from a COVID perspective is the fact that the country is not going to be able to test the amount of people that they need to test, really. I mean, it's just not going to work. What's going to work is going to be at-home testing kits. So that's a big thing that we're working on with some government, with some of the state governments, to just make sure that Medsaf can be at the forefront of dispensing, those testing kits and helping to gather the data back to relevant officials. So that's one thing that's been a great opportunity. So you can kind of look and see, well, what are some of the ways that my business in this environment can actually help with the overall goal of the country at this time, right? So we see testing a huge area for us to be able to add value. I would say that the biggest disruption, or not disruption to our business, but the biggest thing that we had to start to think about in much more depth that we didn't anticipate is the unrest in the country. So safety is now a bigger concern of ours. It's what we're talking about, on team meetings every day, which is, are our team members safe where they live? And are our drivers safe? So there's two sides to that. Internally, we have to make sure we have the right infrastructure in place to support our team, make sure that everyone can get through this 2-week period healthy and alive. But it's also now another opportunity because your average hospital or pharmacy isn't going to want to go to the open drug market to go purchase medications, or they're not going to want to go, to go and pick something up. So now it's an even better opportunity for Medsaf to expand, because our service has just means so much more to the average customer than it did before. So we're just seeing opportunity all over the place. I mean, I think collectively, we've all had to take a deep breath and figure out, okay, well, what is this new world going to mean? But I think as long as your company is really solving a real issue, let's not talk about scooters and all these fluffy things. Like, there's infrastructure, there's real needs of countries in Africa, real needs, healthcare, education, infrastructure. I mean, there's so many dire needs, work on that. And that's where I believe that the biggest opportunity really lies. Solve the people's problems.
Yeah, pretty good. I mean, so you're loving the crisis in terms of your business, in terms of a business. I mean, you've worked hard. I know you spoke around from 2016 trying to change that perception and change the consumer behavior to now, adoption and people knocking on your door.
Honestly, I'm a visionary. I really am. I try to see as far in the future as I possibly can. And as long as you've got the right core values, I think that there's always going to be an opportunity. I think this is collectively for the world. It's a good thing. It's exposing a lot of the real issues that have been under the surface. And as entrepreneurs, it's now your time to create the future that you want to live in, that you want your children, your legacy to live in. And I think this is a huge opportunity for Africa to rise as a continent. And each and every one of us can stake a claim in this new future. I think it's horrible that people are dying. My parents are in Chicago working on the front lines in hospitals. So, every day, I'm, very worried about the people that will die from this. But I think from a bigger perspective, collectively as a whole human race, we've got an opportunity here to change the story. So overall, it's good, not just for me, but I'm excited to see what's going to come out of this in many industries.
Great. Before I come to Kola, just to say, we will open it up to questions and answers. If you want to pose a question, please use the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. And we will try and get to some of those later on. Also, there's a poll there if you'd like to add your thoughts on that. Kola, if we come to you, Ventures Platform and your portfolio companies, how is this crisis affecting you, and what are the opportunities that it's providing also?
Great. I think Vivian has identified some of the things I was going to mention. I mean, I guess the first bit I'll say is, broadly speaking, I'd like to segment the situation into three buckets, right? There's a period of a lockdown. There's a period, a longer period of the pandemic, and there's the post-pandemic period. And I think for each of those three buckets, businesses and investors have to view them very, very differently. In countries like Nigeria, there's I saw, we've been studying a McKinsey report that identifies 4 different scenarios for Nigeria specifically, and each of those 4 scenarios, we go into a deep contraction, or call it a recession. And so I think that for me, that's the bigger sort of lens through which we're looking at this crisis, and that's on the negative side. Now, you've asked us to focus on the positive, because I do think there is some positive to all of this. So on the one end, before now, we always held a view that Nigeria particularly wasn't necessarily ready for a full-on digital sort of economy, as it were. So, I mean, you've seen how e-commerce companies have, struggled even with lots of capital. But I think one of the silver linings of this crisis is that it does 2 things. One, it accelerates adoption, and it reduces the cost of customer education. And so for the right kind of company, this actually presents an opportunity. But we feel that entrepreneurs must not misplace product pandemic or product corona fit for product market fit, because this is gonna pass. I mean, we're gonna be in this situation for a couple of months, and then the real silver bullet is if anyone can predict if humans or if Nigerians particularly are going to completely switch behavior 360 or would go back to their default positions. And I don't know. It's a crystal ball. I don't know if I'm not 100% certain that after this period people are going to completely change behavior. Humans are known to be resilient, are known to be creatures of necessity, and we tend to default back to what we're most used to. And so I think we would see some advances in adoption of digital platforms and digital tools across the board. But I think there's room to still ensure that the adoption you're gaining as a business is not temporal and will last past the period of lockdown and the period of the pandemic. The real challenge, I think, is we're looking at businesses that we can consider to be recession proof, to be resilient, because that's the longer journey that we have ahead of us. At this point, I frankly don't see how we escape a deep, sort of economic slowdown, and that for us sort of is the lens we're looking at. So I think businesses like Vivian's, businesses like that do e-commerce, folks in the health tech space are going to certainly see an uptick in sort of their customer numbers. But how that sort of sustains beyond now is really what we have to all sort of concern ourselves with. I think medium to long term, it's clear to us that there's a need to invest in African biotech and African health tech, and innovations that would help to sort of, because in a situation like the one we find ourselves today, every country is dealing with the same challenge. And so you really can't expect anyone to come help you solve your problem. I mean, the Chinese have been flying all over the place. And so we really have to build more homegrown technology, more homegrown innovation. And I think that's another area of opportunity that we're spotting as we look at our deal flow.
Yeah, very positive. And I think I just saw this morning 54 Gene have raised $15 million for study genetics. Some good news in all the bad news. And I think, there's still some good companies out there who are still raising money in this time, which we'll come to later on. Vivian, I know you started Medsaf in 2016 in the middle of the Naira crisis. So, you started really at a bad time. But look where you are now. I mean, what are the important things you learned starting in that crisis, and the resilience that it's given you as your business now?
I mean, I just think myself as a person, again, it's about having a vision and really knowing that what you think that you've got to offer is going to solve people's problems and create an impact. And that's how I started Medsaf. We started when the Naira started going to 500, 600. That's when we started. But guess what? There's an opportunity there. All the other suppliers who were typically supplying these big hospitals and pharmacies, they started to run out of money. They started to go out of business. So we started at that point in time with dollars in our bank account, able to then step in and say, look, I know you don't know us, but this is what we're offering. And this is how we're better than what you've been doing in the past. So for us, it was actually a great opportunity to make a name for ourselves and to gain traction in the market and start testing out our ideas. So I think just focusing on where is the opportunity, how am I going to be able to achieve my objective, regardless of the landscape, is how we built this business. So this crisis, and plus, first of all, if you're living in Nigeria, I mean, come on, we're already used to nothing, things going wrong all the time. Anyway, so I think, just the resilience comes from having to always have 5 or 6 backup plans and always be, thinking about what you're going to do. But if you have a very clear goal and objective and a core value, and you don't shake on that value, you have a higher chance of making it through any crisis. Hello?
Sorry, I went on mute there. Kola, if we come to you around how you've managed to garner the tech community to come together in the COVID crisis and using tech as a solution to overcome the challenge right now. If you want to talk some more around that.
Apologies. Can you hear me now? Great.
Yeah, I can hear you now. Yeah.
Great. As the pandemic really started to get closer to home, because we were observing all the while, and we knew we had to do something about it. There's 2 things that can happen in a crisis. You either become anxious and sort of fold your hands, or you do something about it. And we felt we needed to do something. And so, we put out that call, and I mean, I must say it was incredible to see the outpouring of collaboration and interest to support. I mean, in less than a week, we got over 500 entries for really solid innovations, folks that had built solutions for Lassa fever, for Ebola, and was simply looking to retool for the coronavirus, and even newer ideas and teams. It was also really nice to get the support of some large corporates like NTN, the Lagos state government, companies, indigenous tech companies like VGG. And today we now have 7 solutions around contact tracing, around triaging for medical professionals, around an IVR solution that are now being rolled out at the NCDC with the Lagos state governments. And I think this is just purely commendable, just really seeing how the ecosystem rallied around supporting these innovations. And I think that speaks to, we talked earlier about how this crisis is truly different. It's that we now have more connections than ever before. We now have, broadband, and we're able to respond very rapidly. And, and just speaks to the progress of the human race in the time.
And Vivian, if we come to you around your business, I mean, data and technology are probably the backbone in you pulling together what you need to have and when you need to have it. I mean, I think you shared with me a great example of, coming into the crisis, how you've used data and technology well.
So you want me to explain how we've used data and technology in the crisis?
Yeah. I mean, I think based on the example of a certain government who were speaking, and countries who are asking you could they source materials from you. I mean, I think it's shown how well Nigerian technology is actually working.
Yeah, I mean, I think take technology aside, I think one of the biggest issues that a country like Nigeria has is the lack of a database that we can trust, right? Name the industry. There's going to be an issue with who, where, why, how, and what, right? And so from the very beginning, we knew that yes, we're going to use technology, whether it's a platform, whether it's an enterprise solution, whether it's WhatsApp. We're going to use technology to connect to our customers. But the bigger thing that we're really building, the most powerful thing that we're actually building, is a database. And that database of medications and information on the movement of medications, who, how much, why, all the information that we can gain from keeping a good database and tracking tracking that movement of medications on both sides of the supply chain is how we are going to be the tech company of the future for pharmaceutical. So that's been in our DNA from the very beginning. And because of that, anything that we're asked, whether it's to, whether it's to supply to, certain, types of medications to our hospitals, or, to start opening up our platform to a new audience like corporations now, it's all just built in the system. The system's already there. So we're not doing anything different from our core competency. And I think it's that has allowed us to be able to say we can partner with, this person or that person. It's that we're not having to invest a lot of time to build out something brand new. We're just, offering it to more people. So I would say that, having technology in our DNA, right? Our customers from the very beginning were using, technology to order their medications through us, to having from the very back in 2016. So just having that in our DNA has just allowed us to move very quickly. And I think in this situation, you need to be agile. You need to be able to switch. Just over the weekend, people started rioting and with machetes and, roving the neighborhood, right? That wasn't something I think people thought the day, when this crisis happened, that we'd have to start thinking about security in such a deep way, right? So anything can pop up. But I think, using technology and using your data effectively allows you to move really quickly and adjust with the times. And that's where Medsaf has been able to be successful in the past and is continuing to just move on. We just want to build on top of that now.
Great. So we just closed the poll, which was online there, and not surprisingly, the biggest challenge that most of our attendees see in the next 3 months is cash flow. Customers comes in second, fundraising, currency devaluation, logistics. If we look at cash flow, I mean, what are the strategies, Kola? Maybe you're speaking with some of your portfolio companies now around maintaining cash flow, survival, for entrepreneurs who are out there listening.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think this is a global challenge, not just a Nigerian challenge, and it's really about survival, right? How much can you stretch your runway? And so this certainly isn't the time to be working on fancy non-essential projects. This isn't the time to be ramping up and hiring, except there's a corresponding sort of inflow that you can see from that. I think the companies that would do well are the companies that would survive and go past this period and settle into a new normal. I mean, so we're generally just advising our portfolio companies to ensure you can stretch your runway for as long as you can, even if you think you don't, even if you didn't have fundraising plans. If you're able to sort of COVID-19 your business model, and that's the thing we're talking to our portfolio companies about. I mean, we have a company that's in the logistics space, and that they're now, sort of building out a whole sort of solution for fulfillment for essential supplies, and that certainly sort of opens up a new opportunity for them. And so around that, for instance, they're doing a targeted fundraise for that sort of new vertical, because again, no one really knows how long this again, my concern is not even about the pandemic. My concern is post-pandemic and sort of the after effects, the insecurity that Vivian has mentioned, and that I think poses a greater challenge, not only for the businesses but for the customers of the businesses that we invest in, and I think having that broad perspective would be helpful for companies operating in Nigeria. I
mean, you mentioned that a COVID plan, COVID proof. Yeah. What's the magic sauce? Because everyone wants to know it.
Well, I mean, look, are you, if you're an ag tech, for instance, what are you doing to better, we have an investment in the ag tech space. So how are you ensuring that your farmers have, access to the food that they need, not just seedlings, but that your entire value chain is COVID-19 is sort of resilient enough to overcome, to survive the pandemic. If you're take a look at some of the logistic companies, for instance, they've been in Lagos, they've been able to access permits for movements because they've been able to pivot their business model to essentially provide essential services. And that doesn't necessarily apply for every business, but there are certain businesses where it can be very applicable once you put on the right lens.
I also have a cool thing to say about that. Well, there's two things. One is through partnerships, right? So Medsaf, we have two partnerships that I won't unveil today that will not only reduce a huge portion of our, of what we actually spend money on monthly, but it will also accelerate us into hospitals and pharmacies. It will allow us to accelerate into hospitals and pharmacies across Nigeria overnight. So by going out and just being creative and seeing who in this space is already doing something that I need to have a competency in order to kind of reach my objective, who in this space, what type of entities in this space can I partner with? That's opening up a whole new opportunity for Medsaf that we wouldn't have been able to capitalize on if we just said, let's raise money and do everything by ourselves, right? So I think I think typically, African startups tend to want to build out everything from beginning to end by themselves. But even in this time, I think it's important to start to open your mind to who are the partners that I can bring that can allow us, that can alleviate some of that need to spend money. So I think that's a huge one that has been that is making Medsaf quite excited. And then also, of course, sometimes you have to spend money to make way more money. So, what are some opportunities that you might have to potentially purchase new, purchase something or something that you can, invest in that will actually pay you back more during this time. That's another way to just kind of use creativity to extend your run rate. And those are two methods that Medsaf has already put in place that are proving to be extremely exciting and hopeful for us from a runway perspective.
Okay, great. We've got lots of questions, so I'm going to jump into some of these and we'll try and get through as many as we can. Kola, one for you. I'd like to know, this is from an anonymous person, I'd like to know what steps startups are hoping to launch post-coronavirus could raise funding for a pre-seed project. I mean, in terms of your investment strategy now, and in terms of, how likely are you to invest in new companies, and how active do you see the next 6 months being?
Oh yes, we are actively investing. Again, what's just changed is the lens and the criteria for evaluating companies that we choose to invest in. And so, in terms of looking at the economics and the numbers of the companies we support, we would be keenly evaluating the possibility of the company to survive in a down economy. And I think the most critical question there is how much of a painkiller is your offering, right? Because folks, there's going to be increased competition for share of wallets of folks, and so it's really how much of a pain point are you solving? How capital efficient is the business itself? I think those are the types of questions that investors will be asking. Another one that relates to a question that was asked in the Q&A is really about valuations. I think over the last 3-4 years, we've seen sort of valuations take a run on the hill. But I think what this does is it sort of helps to reset and sort of brings a bit of calm to the market, because generally speaking, capital is going to become increasingly scarce. Certain investors are just not investing anymore, at least for the next 6 months until they understand where all of this will settle. And so from an investment standpoint, why we're not bargain hunting, we think that there would be better sort of much more reasonable valuations, particularly because of the impending risk of a continued currency devaluation, which we expect to see as well. I think that also, what that does as well is it also sort of begs the question for business models where startups discount the consumption of their customers. That tends to become a lot harder when you have a currency devaluation, and so as Vivian said in the beginning, you have to be solving a hard problem that people are willing to pay for, even with less and less disposable income. And this is just really about survival of the fittest. Some of the best businesses today were born in down economies, and so yeah, that's.
And the question here to Medsaf: what are you and other medical startups doing to increase digitization of this space? Well, I think you basically have digitized the space. Is facial recognition technology being used? I'm not sure.
So when I started Medsaf, I said to myself, because I took a bike. I mean, I was on the back of motorcycles all the way in Ogun State and trying to see, okay, well, what kind of technology are people using? And we surveyed hundreds of hospitals to figure that out. And I said, it has to be as easy to use as Facebook, as easy to use as Instagram, as Amazon or Jumia at the time, right? It's got to be simple, because the reality is that, that's the kind of literacy that we're dealing with. The stakeholders that we're dealing with, they can go on Facebook, they can click on and order something online, but I don't think it needs to be that much more complicated. So no, facial recognition is very far away from, I think, what's necessary here. I just think right now, what's necessary is that there is an awareness that you have something that's really simple, easy to use, and takes into consideration a lot of the pain points of using technology in a country like Nigeria, whether that's internet, accessibility, etc. So keep it simple, and it has always just kind of been my motto, and it doesn't need to be complicated to be extremely impactful.
Yeah, and another question for you. I mean, and I think, this comes back to one of the reasons why you founded Medsaf. I mean, the personal reason around, are fake drugs still a huge problem, or is there greatest awareness now?
So, I mean, I love Nigerians, but, now you're going to see 1,000 companies that all of a sudden offer, face masks or, this or that. And so what we're seeing now in the market is that there's a ton of companies that are just popping up with unvetted, materials, PPE for hospitals. And so now more than before, you've got the opportunity for fake and substandard medications to enter the system. So yes, absolutely. And it will probably get worse now, right? So it's much more important to really back the companies like mine and other companies that are trying to focus on authentication and supply chain transparency, because that will be a huge issue that we won't hear about until people start dying from it.
Yeah, it's very true. I mean, Kola, coming back to the investment thesis, and one question here from Chris. He asked, how realistic is it that you will do a deal without shaking someone's hand or looking into the white of their eyes, face to face, versus Zoom profiles where people have backgrounds of skyscrapers and they're telling you that they've got amazing businesses?
That's a really good question, but I think for us at Ventures Platform, we were actually prepared for this moment. In the beginning, we had, part of what we would say is we would need to spend physical time with the entrepreneurs before we would invest. But I think we sort of dropped that about a year and a half ago. We found that spending enough time on video conferencing, and really, because the ecosystem in Nigeria and most of Africa is quite close knit, there's a lot of history that people leave behind. And so we oftentimes would speak to folks that they've worked with in a previous startup. We spend a lot of hours digging into the numbers, getting to know the entrepreneurs. And I think anyone that says they wouldn't invest because they can't spend physical time with the entrepreneurs is really just losing out on an opportunity. At the stage at which we invest, we're really taking a bet on the founder. And so really, by the time you spend, a couple of hours on a video call, volley questions back and forth, we're able to sort of decipher if this is the kind of entrepreneur we want to support or not. To be honest, some of our best deals were done virtually. I didn't see Shola when we invested in Paystack, for instance. It was after the check was wired that I got to see him. So just as an example.
But does that come back to it being like a hot referral where somebody has qualified that referral versus like somebody out of the blue?
Yeah, so that certainly helps. We also recently quietly launched a couple months ago our Scout Network, and so we have 5 scouts that are actively referring deals, and deals that come through that network are even more highly regarded than regular deals. And this is classic old VC wisdom, right? If you know someone that knows a partner or senior associate in the firm, you have a better shot at being considered. As much as we've tried to democratize it, you can pitch us on our website directly. It does help when there's an introduction.
Great, we'll give it a go after this. Coming back to the data, Vivian, Jill Kerr has asked, for Medsaf, could you explain a bit more why the data is useful and how will it drive medication demand?
Yeah, so you've got a situation in Africa, in Nigeria, but across Africa where there are thousands. Well, first of all, let's just take a step back. 70% of all medications are imported, right? You've got a massive open drug market and black market as it pertains to the pharmaceutical industry. That's just a fact. We're not manufacturing here at the capacity that we need to. And because of that, you've got thousands and thousands of SKUs. Right? So, there might be 20 different types of paracetamol, different price points, et cetera, coming from many, many different sources. So from a pharmaceutical perspective, database is just typically just too hard. It's very hard, right? So by focusing on that, focusing on understanding what are the needs of the people, then you can start to use that information of what people are purchasing, why they're purchasing, what's the price point that they can purchase at, to start to change their behavior, influence their behavior of what they purchase, and then also understanding the needs, what they're going to need in advance, right? So this is all about preempting demand on the customer side. On the supplier side, you want to help them preempt their demand. They need to know how much they need to have. So that's a good example of how focusing on building a database and focusing on the flow of medication from point A to point B can greatly help the industry as a whole. Think about being able to start to influence people based on your data to purchase better types of medications than they are purchasing. Think about being able to influence manufacturers to give you better prices because of your off-takers. So that's just an example for me for pharmaceutical, but you can apply that to almost every industry in Nigeria. That idea that the data and understanding the behaviors, the movements, the patterns, the price points will allow you to create a massive service to that industry. So yeah, data is extremely important for a pharmaceutical perspective and greatly undervalued until now, potentially.
Okay. And coming back, I mean, I know, Vivian, you raised it early on, this is a time for ventures who are solving real problems, ventures who are building businesses solving real problems. One question came in there from Tebalua. Is there a concern that some current investments and partnerships that are specifically focused on solving issues related to COVID may not be profitable post-COVID? So, I mean, are we going too far down the road of focusing on building solutions? You know, if we look at Zoom right now, they're seeing a huge spike. Will everybody, you know, discontinue their subscriptions post-COVID?
Again, it goes back to the comment I made in the beginning that, you know, product COVID fits shouldn't be mistaken for product market fit. You know, there's a temporary change in behavior, and you would have to have a crystal ball to predict that change in behavior is going to be permanent. Now, businesses are going to have to figure out how they keep the new customers that they gain as a consequence of this crisis, and that comes to the stickiness of your product, how close you stay with your customers, and the real felt value that they feel from the service offering. Again, there's a whole nother bucket of companies, for instance, companies in our challenge, in the innovation challenge for COVID that we did, you know, where the focus really wasn't on the quality of the business model, but really about solving a global challenge, you know. And so I think we mustn't mistake the focus on solving this crisis as a sustainability of your business model. There has to be a clear distinction there. Vivian, if you wanted to come, yeah.
I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Vivian.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's definitely going to be people that are going to say, oh, I'm going to create this company because I'm going to be able to raise this money because it says COVID. But the point is that, and I think Kola made it, which is that you've got to have, what is your business? What is the problem that you're trying to solve? And, you know, what are your values, your goals? You know, where are you trying to go? And that's what will be sustainable past, you know, this period of time. But I also believe that there are some short-term wins. There are some really quick wins that will allow you as a company to learn, adapt, and then potentially, bring it into your organization. So if I think about, you know, potentially creating sending large orders of gloves and sanitizers to large corporations, you know, now that's an opportunity to understand how they work and how it could potentially serve their needs even better in the future in a more sustainable way, right? So that's just an example, but just think about how some of these, you know, short-term pivots might, you know, be advantageous for your company in the future. I think those are the people that will succeed post-COVID.
But also, I think you're far too modest, Vivian. I think, you know, when we spoke with data earlier, and I know we've had previous discussions, but you know, I think you were using data and being more predictive and ordering in, you know, quantities of certain materials. And I hope you don't mind me saying, but I know you said certain governments from other countries or certain countries were actually contacting you in Nigeria about sourcing the material. So does that not just say how well you've used technology in driving this?
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah. And I think, but also the fact that, you know, we had a vision, you know, so many people said we're not going to be able to get it done in the beginning, and we stuck to it. And so I think it's more of the grit and the vision that we had, and we doubled down on what we know would work. And being able to kind of build the credibility that people from the US are asking me to ship, you know, people from, you know, Italy. I mean, so it's coming from just being focused, really understanding the need and thinking ahead of everybody else. When they were investing in e-commerce or, you know, fintech, we're focused on healthcare because guess what? You need healthcare. So the world is now coming around to that in an unfortunate way, but you know, I think it's more of just staying the course and being resilient. Yeah.
Okay. One other question here around mobile operators. I suppose this is a difficult one for you guys to answer, but I mean, Do you think that the local mobile operators have stepped up in terms of reducing costs for services and helping?
I'm actually happy to chime in here because I was the Ministry of Communication set up a committee like a COVID impact committee. A couple of people are on there. I'm on there, chaired by Tommy Davis. And one of the recommendations we've actually made is for the ministry to work with the telcos to look at what they can do, because this isn't far-fetched. Certain countries in certain markets, telcos have actually come in to reduce, because there is a rapid increase in demand, and they've come in to just make broadband more affordable. Because this remains one of the biggest hurdles for the companies that we're seeing in the edtech space. A number of them, like ULesson, for instance, recently announced a partnership with Airtel, where they're zero rating their platform on the Airtel network. And so I certainly think that the telcos can do more, and I expect to see them do more as a fallout of some of the recommendations we've made. Yeah.
And also, I want to. Sorry.
Go ahead, Vivian.
I just wanted to add that I think telcos are extremely important as being able to reach people, right? And the telcos could do so much more because of the fact that everybody has access to a phone in Nigeria. And in fact, cell phone adoption, was much quicker in countries like Nigeria than it was in the West, right? So if everybody has access to a phone, think of all the things that you can do, whether it's in finance or even in healthcare, et cetera, with that fact. So I definitely think that making it cheaper, making it easier is great, but they can even be and play a much more integral role in pushing forward a lot of the core needs of countries like Nigeria. And I hope that this is an opportunity for like an M-Pesa to be able to be possible in Nigeria, for example. Just go throw everything at the window and just go and just grab everything that we know we need. I think this is the moment, right? So I think you know what I mean, Kola. Just like let's just get these things closed. So that's what I'm just hoping for.
Yeah, I think as was raised by Candice Goodman here as well, the need for reverse bidding of data sponsored by brands. I know Boinu in South Africa are already working on that. There's a number of different companies who are, working on ways to incentivize mobile data so that the consumer doesn't suffer. But we've got about 7 minutes left. I think we've still got a lot of questions, but for those questions we don't get to, please use hashtag #ATSConnects, and we'll try and get some of those on social media. I just want to come back to the two of you, and I know because you're both doing great work right now with your own businesses and initiatives, and probably come back to you, Vivian, in terms of your biggest challenge right now. I know a lot of people spoke around cash flow. I know you mentioned before you were hiring more staff. What does the outlook look like for you in terms of, what is your biggest challenge right now?
Well, like I said earlier, I kind of alluded to earlier, the big cash flow challenges that we would have had, we've created these amazing partnerships to be able to solve them for ourselves. So that's great. I'm not worried about where we're going to be next year. The biggest thing for me is I need investors. I need money. I can make this 1,000 times bigger than what it is right now if I had closed my round. But in December or November when we opened it, now the world looks a lot different, right? So I'm definitely raising currently and going through due diligence and just trying to have everything fall in place the right way. The world does look a little bit different than it did when I started. So, I definitely need mentors to kind of help me, navigate some of the things that I am trying to figure out. But we definitely need right investors, because we could take over Nigeria at the moment. And that's how big it is at stake for Medsaf right now.
Great. Well, I know an investor. He invests on Zoom. His name's Kola. So
I call Kola so I tried to call him 2 weeks ago, but
Oh, okay.
maybe
We're
now.
gonna Vivian, you've just blackmailed me, so we're gonna do that call. I guess I guess the biggest challenge for us right now is just really supporting our portfolio companies to ensure they can sort of survive this sort of curveball. A number of them were because we invest early, which might be why we may not be the perfect fit for Vivian, because our business is further along. But for those companies that we've supported early that are actively raising rounds, again, the world is a completely different place. Some investors are trying to renegotiate valuations mid-process, which isn't the norm. But again, the argument is that it's a really different world, and folks are anticipating a deep devaluation, right? Which does have real impact when you're raising fundraising in the US dollar or foreign currencies. And so I think really just helping our companies navigate the changes is sort of a preoccupation. The second priority for us is trying to predict the future, right? Trying to figure out what the world will look like in 6 to 12 months. How bad will this recession be? How much runway does a company need to have on average? And that's the tricky part, right? Because no one really knows. There's no one really knows how this all shapes out. And so just trying to sort of paint a picture of that future is something we're spending a lot of time doing at the moment.
And I know nobody has a crystal ball, but what is your outlook? I mean, in terms of the ventures that you're advising, and we've all been through past crashes and crises. Vivian started a business in the Nwakah one. We've had the .com. Where do you see this? I mean, and again, it's quite difficult to make a call, but in terms of advising ventures on runway and things like that, what's the kind of runway you're talking around?
My view is that 2020 is done. It's going to be a difficult year for companies that are trying to fundraise, to be quite pragmatic. I believe that for certain kind of businesses like Vivian, this is a golden opportunity. And so the right investors have to identify that and back companies like Vivian's company. So edtech companies, for instance, we're about to announce 2 new investments that we've just made, in the last couple of days in that space. Health tech companies have a golden opportunity, but investors have to get over the initial shock, and it's a shock of what's just happened, and really spot the opportunity. We also think that you would see a massive sort of shrink in the cost and time to educate users for online services. We think that this might just be an opportunity for e-commerce. We noticed yesterday that ShopRite, for instance, has launched a online shopping sort of tool in Nigeria, and I was just thinking that some of the guys like Supermart and Co that came up that started off years ago, are sort of not around to benefit from this upsurge, and so it's really interesting times. We're out of time, so I'll just pause here.
Yeah, we are out of time, and I just want to come back to one thing. Your COVID challenge. I know you're extending that COVID challenge. If you want to have a brief moment on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so we're extending that, and we're looking to expand that Pan-African. The announcement should roll out for the second batch in a couple of days. So please just follow us on Twitter at Ventures Platform Hub, or my Twitter, Kola_Aina. I typically retweet everything. Our website is venturesplatform.com. Thank you very much, Andrew.
Yeah, we'll also retweet that on Africa Tech Summit Twitter. Vivian, for those people listening right now, they've got checkbooks open. How can they get in touch with you?
And thank you, Kola, for saying such nice things. This is the opportunity. Don't be scared. This is Africa. This is Nigeria. you've got to be bold. This is an opportunity to completely change the landscape in your favor. Medsaf is a good bet, clearly. So you can contact me at vivian@medsaf.com. I'm on LinkedIn all the time, so you can also look me up there. But yeah, I think just this, let's be brave. It's a brave new world, and it's time to really give the people what they need and use this opportunity to change the whole game. And so I'm quite excited with what's going to come out of all of this, other than the people suffering. So
yeah. Well, I'm sorry we didn't get to answer everybody's questions. As I said, you can continue to connect on hashtag ATS Connects or follow us on our social handles, which are on the screen now. I'd like to say a big thank you to Kola and Vivian, who've taken some time out today in quite busy environment. So thanks very much for making the time. And Africa Tech Summit is also here to help. If we can help you in any way, please use the email. We're happy to share news or asks with the community, try and connect with investors as best we can. So please use the hashtags and the social media handles. And with that, I would like to say thank you very much for your great time.
Thank you, Andrew. Take care. Vivian, thank you. Let's try that again over email.
Yeah.
Okay. Bye.
Bye, guys.